filming the news shows and my analysis of it of late. And it's an experimental thing going on, and I believe they said about a dozen different markets across the country that it's the first cable attempt at interactive TV. So that the people out there that's getting us on cable, which of course I guess some of you already found out, is one behind there is not just the guy, but there's a monitor in there, and sometimes I hear this sound, and that means that somebody out there on cable is, at any rate, I thought maybe you'd like to know that. So sometimes it's instantaneous that people are, from those 12 or 13 cities, they're instantly flashing in messages like, would you analyze the news I'm about so-and-so, or would you repeat so-and-so? So, at any rate, so sometimes the news directors and et cetera ask me to analyze certain ones, and sometimes you people request, but sometimes it comes from the audience. And somebody had already asked about one. They didn't seem to hear it, and I was going to reread it before we really get into all of it. Was one man's brain said to him, if I'm forced into any other directions, just forced one more time by those guys downstairs, down below, I am going to die. And his brainstem said to him, no, get it straight. If they don't, then you're going to die. And we already had several messages waiting here from the interactive, back behind, you know, I know, but we're looking back behind. There were some already related, but we just started the last news show to get around to some of it. It had to do with, I don't have the actual news item, but the basis of it was that when it gets down to it, city mental butterflies want to be pinned. The city mental butterflies, in fact, want to be dead butterflies. And it was connected to another one, which they also didn't bring, but somebody requested. And just so happened they were both connected. There was another one that, in part, pointed out that as a child, many men dream of this great adventure. And then when they get grown, they settle for just a great weariness. And what this amounts to, the two put together, without it being an attempt to give anyone the blues, it is in fact because all you have to do is think back to your own nervous system. It has to do with hormones. To really get down blunt with it, it has to do with the most basic operations of human life, and not just the neural, but it appears to be because that is where the screen is. But the people start off with many people, let's say anybody that would be interested in this, even in a cursory manner now, had a dream of some great adventure in life. And then you find yourself at some age, and you would have certainly an excuse, a story, family, responsibilities, and etc. The day comes fairly quickly when the great adventure seems far away. It is, in fact, back to the butterflies in the city, in fact, want to be dead butterflies. That if you can see it, it is hormones that start the adventure. It is the excitement of being alive. I know this is not the way it is normally portrayed, and I can't present it as being some great secret or some great revelation that will make people happy, because if ordinary people heard it, even if they heard the words, it wouldn't make them happy. It wouldn't necessarily cause them to be suicidal, but they would just find it to be a waste of time at the least, and probably at the worst. Why bother to talk about such as that? But there is the excitement that you're alive. The excitement of just being born is why, I could put it this way, that all babies that have any sanity, any potential sanity, the first thing you do is squeal with delight. Well, as you know, those you've been around, doctors in fact have to slap you to calm you down. Well, you wake up all the other little kids in hospitals, there are sick people there. But when you're born, it's just, whoo! I mean, that's your first word is whee and whoo, and they have to, calm down, maybe give you some drugs. Then, it's like the second great excitement which is the real human excitement, and that is when the intellect, in a sense, gets born. I'll use technical terminology. You begin to talk. It is then, up until that point, it's been a great adventure for those 18 months or 2 years or 12 years, according to how slowly you developed. I know. We all marched to a different drummer, and some of you I know are crippled. Well, no. Some people are marching to a band that the drummer's snare had a busted head, and it was, I know it was hard to tell whether he was actually playing, that sort of thing. The first adventure is like those first several years, and it's nonverbal. All you got to do is gurgle and slobber, and it's the great adventure of being alive. But then the great adventure, as far as the human condition is concerned, is once you begin to talk, and that's when you, in fact, have the beginnings of the dream of the great adventure, because until you can talk, you can't dream anyway. I mean, you can lay there asleep like a dog and go. But that, you're not dreaming. You're not. So, you can only dream of the great adventure once you begin to talk. Everybody dreams of great adventure, and I'm not going to try to define it any longer or make any differentiation, which there is, obviously, as you should know, between men and women. You all dream. It is a dream of a great adventure. And it doesn't have to be that it was originally some mystical dream. That is, that you had a dream that you're going to go and discover some great hidden secret, or the Holy Grail, or the Unholy Grail, or discover where they buried the scripts from the old Monty Python shows. It doesn't have to be that. It is just that you've got a dream that life is really going to just be, you don't know what. Just astounding. You're going to meet astounding people, or you'll meet an astounding woman or man, or a marriage partner, a great love affair. It's just that life is, I can hardly wait. And of course, some people like to run away from home. They can hardly wait. Very shortly, notice, and I repeat one more time, it's not to make a critical observation or a social observation about man, because it's not mental. Only ordinary people would believe that. To say that very shortly you get grown, and you settle for not the great adventure, you settle just for a great weariness, just a great downhill slide. If we just stopped there, we could start playing, all of us, some kind of cultural, social commentator and critic about, isn't that true? People just give up, and just men will settle for the most mundane, etc. That's for the ordinary, because they can't get anywhere with it. It just goes round and round and round. What happens is the hormones reach their peak in a certain sense, and the idea of the great adventure, for anyone to be able to hold it past the point of maturity, you got to look at it another way. That's what's unnatural. It's only ordinary people, psychologists, sociologists, would-be mystics, that would take what I just used about the dream of a great adventure when you're a child, and then by the time you get grown, you don't worry about the dream. You just settle for a great weariness, a great blandness, a great several succeeding 4 or 5 decades of extreme beigeness. Great apartment living. The great flat line of a dead man's EKG. But see that, and people have made such observations as this and gone off, and people's made reputations, I'm sure, in the field of sociology and etc. That's not the point, because they take it as being a personality phenomenon. That is, they take it as being some sort of intellectual or spiritual or some failure of man's heart. That yes, we all should go off on some great adventure and pursue the muse that talked to us as a child, to follow our dreams, and then in some way we give up. Shame on us, we just don't persevere. That ain't it. I mean, that's the way ordinary people have to think, or else civilization would fall apart. They have to believe, we could do it differently. It's in our hands. It's up to us. It's a failure on our part individually, spiritually, mentally. They call it all sorts of things, but they would say that it's the individual. It is a failure on his part to persevere, to keep up the great crusade, the great search, the great pilgrim's progress. to take the path less traveled by. But not to take it for a while and go, Jesus, I'm here all alone. I'm going back to the main path. See, they take it as being that sort of thing. It's not. But the truth offers no great relief or any area of promise for ordinary people to say, well, I tell you, you know why you gave up the idea of a great adventure, that you're going to travel the world, or that you're going to find some great mystic somewhere to tell you the secret of life, or you're going to figure it out? No, why? Well, you got to be nowadays 20, 21, and your hormones begin to go downhill. You begin dying right on schedule. And the very fuel, the guys down below that's been driving that drove it for the first 20 years, they begin to sit down on the job. It's like the supers downstairs stoking the furnace. You may not be dead yet, but by the age of 20 nowadays, they began to slow walk. That's labor talk for those of you that, I know most of you have been in the area of employers, but instead of looking at it from the capital side, look at it from the labor side. Never mind. Sorry. People downstairs will take, as all physical people do, everyone down in your own basement, in your own nervous system, given any chance, they will sit down. It is the mind, we've been through this, it is the mind that has people out jogging. It is not the people downstairs. It is neurons that have people out jogging, lifting weights, working out. It is not the very things that they seem to be working on. That is the hormones. The hormones have a great deal of fun, as you notice just from children. And I know that a lot of you were children. And so you can either look at observations of other children or think back when you were one. Those of you who were, that like especially up to 12 or 13, you were just a little bundle of energy. Your parents were still, trying to figure out if there's some way. Maybe we'll talk to the doctor that delivered him. Is there some way that we can legally drug this kid and calm him down? He's driving us nuts. But if you remember, it was just, for the first 12 years, it is just off the wall. Just so much fun just to be friggin' alive. After that, it begins to... Anyway, let's jump to 20. Let's jump to whenever you are grown. It is then that the body begins to slow down, the news items referring to hormones. They literally slow down, except that's too crude. So that's an allegory with no way out for another news item. And you remember that conversation that went on, and one guy's supposed to be two people talking, one said, well, what if you had an allegory that didn't have a way out? And the guy said, well, it wouldn't be an allegory then. And he said, well, I guess in that case we never heard of such a thing. He said, oh yeah, we have. And the guy said, well, what is it then? He said, it's two crude statements of fact. T-O-O, crude, that's the adjective, the modifier. It's statements of fact that are too much in your face. It's point blank walls. I mean, what kind of allegory is that? Nobody wants to hear that. If they could hear it, because they heard it, the thing is, well, why talk about stuff like that? That's like talking about dying, except it's worse. Because dying, they know there's no way out. And this, they think, well, maybe there's some way out, but I didn't know there was a way in if you hadn't brought it up. Would you please shut up? Thank you. I will if you'll send donations to the Little Richard Memorial Fund. At any rate, what I was going to try to tie these two together, let you see, there is in a quite real sense, and the news item used butterflies, not to make people feel bad about beautiful creatures dying, but think about something as beautiful as a butterfly, and it was used as city mental butterflies, which is obviously an allegory to give you a way out. Then what is it they want in life? That if you look at a certain view, what could be more beautiful than a butterfly? A beautiful butterfly, it is free, it doesn't have a job, no mortgage, it's not tied to gravity, and it can fly. It can go and do things that a human cannot, and it's much better looking than some of us. No offense, but you know that to be a fact. And then to point out that what is it that city butterflies primarily want? Most of them. Almost the unthinkable. What they want is to be dead butterflies. Back to the kinds of stories that even ordinary minds would take of the news item that as children, many, many people dream of a great adventure, and then when they get grown, many, many people settle for a great weariness, for a great, let's sit down, see if we can't coast for the next 50 years, which you can. It is, although they could not say this, not ordinary people. They could not, or they would no longer even be ordinary. It would be a sign of a kind of intellectual illness. So they can't say it, they can't see it. But the mind, the neural aspect, once the hormones begin to slow down, once the great adventure is sort of just a dream, or, well, I was too excited when I was a kid. I didn't know what life was about. I thought I was going to go travel the world. Jesus, I got a kid already. I got car payment. The truth is, it's not psychological. Don't leave it there. But it is, back to the butterflies, it is almost, almost a relief to people's mind to get slain, to get over the adventure. It's why the news item was put in such a way that as children, many people dream of a great adventure, but then as grown-ups, as mature adults, they settle. They won't say, oh, I'm glad about it. I'm glad that I got over the adventure. But they will settle for it. Even an ordinary person, if they took this little allegory and followed it a little bit, that's all right. I'll go along with that. I didn't like it when I ended up, no offense, I love my wife or my husband, whoever it is. But, here it was, we suddenly accidentally had a couple of kids, and then I had to, go in debt, and her mother died, or my mother died, we had to take over part of the... responsibilities. That's the way life works. You say, yeah? And they could hear this news item and say, all right, the way you put it, you're right, I didn't like it, but I did settle for it. What was my choice? Was I going to turn around and suddenly say, wait a minute, I always wanted to go to India. I always wanted to travel the world and study mystical religions. Wait a minute. Why should I stay here and put up? I didn't tell you to get pregnant. I didn't ask to have a family. Why should I? You can't do that. Not and be ordinary. Not and be the heart of ordinary civilized life. And so the person would say, you're right, I didn't particularly want it. I didn't plan it perhaps. But I settle. You're right, I settle. Now what I'm trying to get you to see, that in a sense that they could not use, they couldn't admit it, much less use it, it's beyond settle. It's a relief. It's a relief. The hormones are already dying. The great excitement from the second birth, when you started talking, it's over from age 20 or age 12 to say 20, just more or less. The idea of the great adventure, it's about gone. But it's kind of a relief to figure that something killed it. Well, I ended up with 2 kids before I knew it. I was 19, I had one, then 20, I got another one over here. I can't just go off and leave them. What kind of man would I be to do that? To take a male view. And you can say, that's true. I still dream about it. I still read books every now and then, flying saucers or, the King Arthur tales. Every time I see a new version, I think about it. But, I had responsibilities. City butterflies, by and large, dream of being dead butterflies. It is a kind of relief. And this is not an excuse. But do you understand that downstairs, the hormones have quit firing up the furnace that made you dream of the great adventure originally. It's now slowing down. Rather than looking at this be some kind of excuse or something to be explained away, look at it. It's a form of stability. Life knows what it's doing. That people say, well, I would have pursued my adventure, but I ended up with a family. I ended up with responsibilities. My mother came down with a terminal illness that was prolonged. I had to stay home. I couldn't go off and leave my mother. I know. I agree. And we all agree. Doesn't it work out just right? Butterflies are relieved to finally be pinned down. God Almighty, now I don't have to fly around, I don't have to dream, thinks a butterfly, allegorically. Now I don't have to dream. I always wanted to fly. Let's say you grew up in Texas. And you thought, well, most of my friends and family, when they really take that great adventure, they go down to Mexico for the summer or the fall. I always dreamed, I don't know, fool that I am, always dreamed of flying over to the Canary Islands. I know none of my family's ever done it, but here I am dead now, so I don't have to do it. They got me pinned here in this book. And nobody can say anything. Another butterfly is going to say, well, wait a minute. You mean you didn't go on the great adventure just because you're dead? How ridiculous. Same way, a person asks themselves or someone else brings it up. I thought you were going to go over and go into a Zen monastery over in Tibet or somewhere in China. The guy goes, yeah, oh yeah, I hadn't lost my interest, but since the last time I saw you, you remember that girl I was going with, or I end up with a family. The same way, another butterfly can't say, you mean you didn't fly with the Canary Islands for the simple reason that you're dead? As ridiculous as that is, back to the sane, ordinary level, an ordinary person. People cannot dance that way verbally. Another person not going to say, you mean just because you had a child, just because you were the father or the mother, and just because your mother came down also with some terminal illness and she didn't have bad luck, are you saying just because of that you didn't go off to Japan? It is a kind of, I assume you see now so I can leave it, not in the psychological sense of justifying something. When I say it's a relief, it's not that people go, well, it is nice that I finally ended up with a family so I didn't have to go off and try to go to Japan or sit around some monastery and freeze my gun walls off and sit out there and pour cold water on me. And, that sounds nice, and if you were an ordinary critic, you could pick on somebody else that way, or pick on society, aspects of humanity, and say, that's true, people talk a good game, but they won't do it. They're not supposed to do it. You're supposed to get 20 and settle for the great weirdness, the great blandness. Yes, I had these great dreams, but by God, I'm civilized, I'm sane. Bring in the painters and paint everything in sight beige. And anytime I sort of get the willies about the blandness of it all, I can go read a book. I'll turn on National Geographic. I'll drink 4 or 5 cups of coffee real fast, and I'll dream for a few minutes. That's the way it is. There were throughout, there are 2 or 3 that we can tie into this, but throughout history, this news item went, certain men have attempted to make themselves indifferent to their surroundings in a crude effort to imitate physically what would be nonpartisan thinking. Since I just thrown in about the dreams of going to a monastery and having to sit out in the cold weather and etc. You don't really have to go that far, although that is still within the confines of fairly acceptable behavior, because people do that nowadays, as you know, or they've always done it. But people nowadays, a banker, somebody will retire and they'll go off to a monastery. It doesn't have to be to Japan, and it doesn't have to be a Buddhist, but people will go off. And even in the midst of ordinary life today, people will do sort of low-level attempts at what they assume to be some kind of spiritual background or a greater spiritual depth to martial arts. Getting back to the point, it gets down to the real extreme as men, fairly sane men. We're not yet out of the ballpark of the middle class of life, but of men who believe, whether they go to great physical extremes to pursue it, but men who believe it, who say they do, who write books, that we would be better off if we were less concerned, if we in some way could steel ourselves against much of our surroundings, physically. That is, don't be a baby. Don't be a sissy. Don't go around whining that it's too hot. Just because you're going to have root canal for the 3rd straight week, be a man. Even if you're a woman, be a man. That is, be a person. Don't whine. And just a few steps past that, even people who would never try it, you can get many sane, ordinary people who would theoretically agree with it if you said, beyond just the point of worrying about whether you have a cold and go around being a baby, I'm talking to a sane, ordinary person now, and say, you do know that there are people who have tried to strive to make themselves less concerned or to feel less the physical changes in the environment. All the way, well, from the extreme, as I'm sure all of you have read, of people who attempt to sit out in the snow, and not move. Or to be able to sit in some head of some monastery or some Zen school, come around and periodically beat you with some sort of little whip. But just enough to find out that you don't have to respond, or we should struggle to keep from responding to every little gnat that comes up and wants to gnaw on us. Now, what kind of person is it that goes around and thinks, I have a Nobel Prize, I jog, and go, oh, a mosquito bit me, and they throw a fit and call their wife over, my shit, suck out the blood, call a doctor. That's not very admirable. But consider all of from that whole, take that smorgasbord and pick out wherever you want to, but the whole idea of in some way being less concerned. Not in the sense of hurting yourself, not taking it far enough to where if it got so hot that you're about to pass out and die and it was going to change, not that, but just the aspects of the environment itself, over which a person could, through some, as they would probably call it, willpower, some special effort, overcome some of the immediate, of no great consequence, response to the change in the environment, whether it's hot or cold, or it's raining today, or whether you've got to, pick a splinter out. Some of that's a waste of time, and men, in some way, also figure it's not just a waste of time, or why whine? Here you are 30 or 40 years old, and somebody's going to pull a splinter out of your finger, and you go, oh no, give me a drink, or, give me some Novocaine. It's just a splinter. It hurts. That beyond that is people will, whether they try to do it individually or not, they will respond in a favorable manner if you talk to them about, if you said there is something beyond the physical aspect of overcoming a little pain. There is something that is admirable. There is something that would be worthwhile for men to do that. And ordinary people will agree to that. I fear I've muddled it all up again. If you have any doubt, look at the literature. Nowadays, I guess movies are a better example. What do they all represent, by and large? Other than the ones that are all through erotic or just a humorous movie, but the ones that have heroes, the heroic literature, which is the heart of all fiction, whether it be written down or now in movies, what is it? It is, in a sense, the hero, the heroine, somebody overcoming, resisting certain changes in the environment, in their surroundings, to their benefit. And even if it appears to have, if it was something as crude in a sense, let's say as a John Wayne or a Clint Eastwood movie, some guy that the odds are against him and people won't mistreat him, they spit on him, they insult him, they hit him, shoot him, knock him out, but in the end he overcomes it all. But along the way, also notice, it would not be, you just never think about it, but what would the hero be? Pick out, maybe I'm not up to date enough, or if it was a science fiction movie and it was who the guy was in the trilogy, the Han Solo, was that? Anyway, some hero, and they come, and the hero in the movie somewhere is going to get beat up on. You know that, it's a variation of the love story, as they used to describe it. Boy meets girl, boy falls in love, boy loses girl, boy gets girl back, the end. That was a blockbuster. It's the same thing with non-romantic movies. That's all fictional heroes. Man arrives, or a woman, but hero arrives. You realize he's hero. Hero's attacked, hero's down. Hero overcomes, the end. That's it. But in there's no place that the hero's going to get put upon. But there's no plot, whether it be a Greek drama or whether it be circa 1993 science fiction movie or a Clint Eastwood update. The hero has got to be almost down. Oh boy, things are looking bad. Look at him. They ganged up. They attacked him from the rear. They've mistreated him something awfully. And he was so decent to them. He knew what they were up to, and look how they did him. But nowhere in that plot is there any room that this happens. He's been mistreated, jumped from the rear. People he trusted. He even helped some of these villainous people earlier in the movie. And now look what they've done. But there's no place in that plot that while he's down, he goes, God damn. Boy, thanks a lot. I was nice to you guys. See, you laugh because you never even thought about it. Do not invest in a script, in a movie, in a production, or a play. If you look down and somewhere in there, the hero or the heroine, because somewhere in there she's got to be down. He's got to be down, misused, attacked, and this may be then. But nowhere in there, if somewhere in there, the hero goes, gee whiz. Don't put any money in it, trust me. Just do not put any money in it. That is why I was trying to get you to see there is a wider variation if I was getting it too confused, because I know, as we all do, that not many people actually go out and try to join some sort of austere monastery or some sort of would-be mystical school, nor do many people put forth a great deal of effort to be non-sissy in the sense that we mean around here. That is, that the environment, being a sissy to the environment, we're back to this. Everyone is like the ultimate sissy, you're going to die. Now, somewhere between here and dying, life is constantly trying to kill you a little bit. Not on purpose. If you take it personally, I'm not talking to you anyway. But life is gradually wearing you down like a pencil. It just is. And so there are people who are trying, whether they put it this way or not, to resist that. And if you point it out, back to where I was, and if you did it through a movie, as strange as it sounds, if I jumped up now, if we were somewhere and jumped up in the middle of not Star Trek. What's the movies I keep trying to think? Yeah. Those kind of things. I know. Anyway, all heroic literature is the same. If you jumped up in the middle of a theater, as far removed as it might seem to be from what we're talking about, and you jumped up and you said, all right, you realize that the hero is being mistreated by people, that the environment is trying to get him down. And people go, yeah. But you realize that what's making him heroic and why you come see it. And it could be people that never had any kind of great, sophisticated thought in their life. Which is not the point, because it's the same reason people like religion. They can be literate and just say, I love religion. That's my favorite form of entertainment. I go to church every time we've got church down the road here. Other people, I go to a movie. It's the same thing. But the heroism of it is, in a sense, in a real sense, the fact that the hero is representing a man who is trying to steel himself, trying to be less driven by changes in the environment. Because if he is driven solely by the environment as much as the person reading the book or watching it, he ain't much of a hero. Now, I left out crude modifiers, like start with elves and stuff. Like, he ain't any kind of hero. He's not. You wouldn't put up with it. You wouldn't put up with him more if it was supposedly some religious leader, somebody of a superior ability in life. Of course, at that level, it all seems to be on a physical basis, is why it has to be portrayed that way. Because there's no way that they're going to portray, or if they could, there's no way that they'd get enough audience to portray a man intellectually trying to withstand the ebbs and flows of ordinary life. But physically, people understand. If you just point out a little bit, as I started saying, if you jumped up in a theater of some crude movie and everybody hooping and hollering, and if you get their attention for a minute and you say, do you realize that what this represents is he is making, at least in part right now in the middle of the movie, at the end it succeeds, but the end may only take a few minutes. But even in the middle, he is at least partially succeeding, and you expect him to totally succeed in overcoming to an unusual degree the influence the environment, his surroundings, seems to have on him. That is, he's being mistreated, the whole town's against him, or he's outnumbered 20-1. He tries to do the right thing, they keep doing him wrong. He'll give them another chance, they do it again. Because if it was an ordinary person, what you'd turn around is lash out or be hurt. The point is, you would be driven as you're supposed to be by the changes in your surroundings. The hero resisted. He struggles not to. That is what people like. And if you point out just at all, and they do not have to be religiously, mystically driven at all, they do understand, yeah, if you said, that represents more than just simply, Clint Eastwood or the Star Fleet Commander. It's not just him physically overcoming these bad guys, the outlaws, or these people from another planet, which is outlaws from Dodge City. They're from another planet, and they look weird, and they act weird, and you can't trust them. It's not that he just physically beat them, which he's got to do for it to be ordinary literature or movies. But if you told them it represents more, they would understand it. If you just say, it represents more, it's like it's something in his heart, it's something in his spirit that does him good. It's not just him being able to beat him up because we know he's going to do that. And they go, yeah. But it's like he makes him a better person. It's some way his heart or his spirit inside of him grows and swells up. Not in a braggadocious sense. Not that he becomes vain about it, because he never even talks to these guys. A real hero really doesn't respond to Philistines and other members of the fun police. Just doesn't. What are you going to say? He doesn't actually respond. And you could get people ordinarily. They're just sitting there, either watching the movie or whatever the flashlight, reading Sophocles or some of the Homer. It represents them struggling against the continual change in their surroundings. That is, in one real sense, what a hero is. The news item. Back to the final line. Throughout history, certain men, throughout history means up until right now. Throughout history, includes now. Throughout history, certain men have attempted to make themselves more indifferent or indifferent to their surroundings in a crude, in a coarser effort to imitate physically what would be nonpartisan thinking. In the sense, not to jump and make it real fast, in the sense of somebody, if you find this to be admirable, let's assume it is in some way, that a man could go off and he joins some monastery or some group somewhere, does all sorts of running and climbing of mountains and pushing boulders and being able to sit out in the snow and not move and to stare into the sun, to sit there in the summertime. And he does all this and physically gets to be not just impressive of being, a huge-looking, strapping figure of a man, but more than that, that you realize that he is not just strong and tall and, big muscles. He can sit there in the rain and the snow. He can sit there and be covered in ants and flies. And he can just sit there. That's impressive enough. Let's assume that you say, well, that is impressive. I can't do it. And that does take some kind of willpower. That shows some kind of effort that the man has done. But what does it really represent? What are people actually after? And what they're after, that is a coarser reflection, the best they can do. It's a hobby. That same thing of being that kind of, displaying that kind of indifference. That kind of, there's no such thing as total, but that kind of greater indifference, greater dependence, greater control by your surroundings. What that represents in a cruder way is what would be to be able to think and now take it mentally that you could sit there in the snow, the sunshine, the fleas, the Philistines, the promises, the whole shooting match and Megillas of everything that goes on in the intellectual life can fall upon you. That's what it represents. So it's always represented. That is what's always missing. That's why it's an allegory that's flawed. That is, there's a way out, and people can continue to interpret religions. King Arthur's story searches for the Holy Grail, the Holy Fleece. Did Troy actually exist? They're all open. You can't pin them down, or they would be dead butterflies. They would be dead allegories. They would no longer be allegories. They would not be living. They would not mean anything. And so men can continue to try and do it on a coarser level, that I will physically make myself less responsive to, less irritated by my surroundings. It sounds right. It feels right to try that. But what they're trying to get to is this. Completely out?
Yeah.
Okay, that's enough.